The worst thing that can happen in our 30s and 40s is you start a business and you start failing slowly. You just don't know. The worst type of business is one that gives you just enough green signals that you keep investing more time and more money. That's the worst thing that can happen to somebody because it failed slowly.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the season finale of The Supply Chain, the only show on YouTube helping resellers get into replenishables. So I put together this whole series very methodically, and we're going to finish up strong just how we started strong. So every single lesson that I put together has basically a teaching lesson in the beginning as well as a sourcing lesson at the end. But this episode is going to give you the final tools that you need. Now, the first thing that we're going to talk about is trademarking. See, every single business needs to have a trademark. That's where all the protection comes from. So if you're going to be doing e-commerce, intangible goods, and you're going to stay in this lane, you're going to evolve in this lane, you're going to bring up your business, you're going to need a trademark eventually anyways. So if you're not going to be registering on Amazon anytime soon just yet, you're just getting into the replenishable portions first, then it's a good idea to start up your trademarking process. Now, for your first trademark, don't worry about anything too snappy, too catchy, too snazzy. You just need something that works in the beginning because honestly, it's really not that expensive in terms of business expenses because it's just a one-time fee. So let's talk a little bit about brand registry and why it's important for transitioning over to Amazon. One of the most scariest things on eBay is to get hit with a VERO strike. And what does VERO stands for? Verified Rights Owners. So basically, they have ownership to a certain trademark, to their branding, to what they're selling, and you cannot infringe on those things. So therefore, you kind of want to be in this space as well as you segue over to more of your own privatized items. So the way to look at it is this. On Amazon, there is a brand registry here so that you can enroll your trademark. Now, as far as the trademark goes, okay, you can enroll your brand here, or you could use their IP accelerator program. So what does this mean? Basically, when you think about trademarks and stuff like that, okay, you would go over to United States Patent Trademark Office and do a search of different trademarks that's already out there because you don't want to use something that's already in use by other people. So basically, if I had to sum it up in a nutshell, there are two prices for this. You could go ahead and trademark stuff yourself. Now, I'm not promoting this particular site, this particular brand. There's plenty of websites out there to help you register your LLC. There's plenty of websites to help you do a trademark. There's LegalZoom. There's like all sorts of stuff. I'm not recommending any one of these companies in particular. I'm just saying that they are available. Now, if you go ahead and register your own trademark on your own, it's roughly about $300 at the time of this video. I don't know what the prices is going to be later on. Now, if you go with Amazon's accelerator program with their IP enrollment, it's much, much faster, but it's two different prices. The accelerator program is generally somewhere around the $1,000 to $1,100 range. So what is the huge difference here? Well, basically, with all of them, you want to spend a little time on USPTO as well as YouTube to learn about trademarks. Now, trademarks come in many different ways, right? And the simplest iteration of it is something called a word mark. What is a word mark? It's just a word. It's just the letters put together. For your first trademark, I recommend that you just pass because no matter if you register the trademark yourself for $300 or you use the IP accelerator program for $1,100, it's basically that's what you have to pay, pass or fail. So you definitely want to pass. I think a nifty trick is if you use your father's last name with your mother's maiden name and ask ChatGPT to go ahead and jumble up a word in between that, something that will most likely pass. So once you have that, then you want to go for your word mark. This explains exactly why we see so many different companies, whether it's from China or not, of basically trademarks and registered brand names that you can barely even pronounce. Like it's just, 30 consonants in a row because they're just looking to pass. Ultimately, you just want the protection and you want to start selling. Make your money first before you start getting fancy with it. This show has always been about risk mitigation and starting small in the beginning before we scale upwards. So just your basic trademark, word mark is good enough here. So what happens is once you go with the IP accelerator versus the trademark over here, there's two different things, okay? Number one is that if you do your own trademark stuff, you need to come down with it first. Meaning, once you file for your trademark and you spend like $300 doing this, you want to make sure that it is fully passed, and then Amazon will accept you. Now, it says over here that they will accept you whether you have a pending or a registered trademark. I could tell you verifiably right now that that is not true, because if that was the case, then it would defeat the purpose of the IP accelerator program. So what's happening here? If you go with the IP accelerator program, basically you pay more in order to grease the wheels. When you click on this, it will take you over to here, and it will show you a whole bunch of different law firms that are partnered with Amazon. And then you would choose one of these law firms. I don't recommend that you just go with the first one you see. Definitely vet all of them, write to them, ask them for pricing, et cetera, et cetera. And then what happens is that once you found the one with the best price, because they all pretty much are reliable and they do the same thing, that's why they're vetted partners with Amazon. You tell them what your word mark is, and they will do a light dive search for you. And remember, this fee is pass or fail. So be very careful to make sure that you came up with the word that is most likely going to pass, as well as use the USPTO website in order to double check. Here we go, search trademarks like this. Watch a lot of YouTube channels in regards to this stuff, okay? Like I said, there's not going to be that much hand-holding in the supply chain, okay? This is for serious entrepreneurs. So once you have this, what ends up happening is that the law firm will submit your application pending, et cetera, everything over to Amazon, not you. And therefore, it goes through right away. How fast? It goes as fast as maybe 5 days you will get this down. If you register your own trademark, the average wait time these days is anywhere between 8 months to a year. So therefore, you'll have to wait until this fully comes down before you could go ahead and enroll your brand. Huge time difference here. So if you're doing this now and you're in no rush, definitely save yourself $600 to $700 and just go ahead and start doing your trademark right now. Get it down for like $300, $350. And then when it's fully passed, you could go ahead and enroll your brand. Otherwise, if you try to go through this while it's still impending, a lot of people are left on red when they do that, because if you could do that, then what's the purpose of the IP accelerator? You see what I'm saying? So I'm just warning you right now that this portion of it, of the pending part, is not true. If you're going to enroll your own thing, it has to be fully registered. Otherwise, Amazon is not going to take it. There are Reddit posts that claim you don't have to, and they will take a pending application. And I'll tell you right now, out of experience, there's a lot of people who tried that to hideously find out that that's not true. So if you're going to register on your own, make sure it comes down, and then you're going with the wait time. Otherwise, use the IP accelerator and then instantly get it done in under 5 days. So today's lesson is one of great importance. We're going to watch this particular video of Reezy Resells, who is a content creator about hustle culture. He has 450,000 subscribers, and he has decided to go ahead and tell his story. So I'm going to be playing and pausing and adding more insight to this the whole way through. So we're going to watch this together.
I'm often asked why I don't sell private label products on Amazon, but what most people don't know is that I actually did try to launch a private label product once on Amazon, and that it didn't go well at all. This is the story of how I lost over $4,000 trying to launch a private label product on Amazon. And if I'm being honest, I failed miserably.
So this is going to be exactly your typical nightmare horror story, exactly what I warned about since episode 1, which is these are all people who got way too ahead of themselves. So you're going to listen to time after time, red flag after red flag of this person getting way too ahead of themselves.
But rather than running away, hiding, and burying my head in the sand, I decided that I would share this story with you guys in the hopes that I could prevent some of you from making the same mistakes that I did.
I disagree with that, because what happens here is that had you been successful, there would be no video at all. But because you're not successful, we might as well turn into a friendly PSA and make a couple of bucks off of it by putting it on YouTube, right? That's what's actually happening. Because as I said, most stuff where it is really effective information is generally gatekept. And that's what makes the supply chain show so different.
Easy resale. Follow the hustle.
Never follow the hustle. Always follow what is real business, because in long term, that is always going to be worth your time. A hustle is something that you will always be personally tethered to. It can't run without a pilot, and that pilot is always going to be you. Do not follow the hustle. Always follow real business.
Mike Resendez, and I've been making a living selling online full-time for well over 15 years. In that time period, I grossed over $10 million of sales, and I did it all starting with $5 when I was on food stamps.
Remember what we said in a previous episode. These big revenue numbers, especially in Amazon FBA in the hustle style, is only somewhere around 5 to 7% actual margins. So those big numbers mean pretty much nothing, especially when you're selling other people's brands. It is very important that when people talk about when they do Amazon, a huge distinction between retail arbitrage at Amazon and what we are doing with private items, replenishables on Amazon. We are doing real traditional business. This is hustle culture and is very dangerous.
And I'm not sharing this figure with you to brag, but rather in the hopes of inspiring you. Now, I don't come from money. I actually grew up on food stamps, welfare, government health care. I had a kid and dropped out of high school at age 16. I'm actually still married to the same beautiful woman almost 23 years later. And selling online is what has allowed me to provide for my family and to live a comfortable life. If someone like me was able to break the cycle, even though most of the adults around me, teachers included, had told me that I was going to end up in prison, I know for a fact that you can do it too. I truly believe that selling online is your ticket out of the matrix, which is why I teach it on my YouTube channel for free. So if that's something that you're interested in and you want to take life into your own hands and not just accept what you were dealt, please consider subscribing to the channel so you can learn more.
He did reselling to get out of a horrible situation. That's the difference. He made a lot of poor life choices early on in his life. So by comparison, better to do this hustle than nothing at all, because he wouldn't be qualified for any other stuff. That's why he regards this the way that it is. But for the rest of us, you want to make much better life decisions than this, so that if we're going to do Amazon, if we're going to do a business, we're going to do it properly from the beginning and not through the lens of hustling.
It all started back in early 2018 when I caught a massive case of shiny object syndrome after I returned from a speaking engagement in Canada that had featured a large amount of successful private label sellers. The success that others were having was getting me quite excited, to say the least. What proceeded next was basically the equivalent of a child who had just seen The Karate Kid for the first time and then decided to run around trying to crane kick everyone.
Private labelers are the majority of sellers. That's what most people don't know. But we keep all of our secrets as hush as possible. And that's the problem. So it gives this illusion that the loudest people on the internet is the most populated people, right? And it's actually not that way at all. So by the time he finally went to, like, let's say an Alibaba event or a real trade show or something, you get to see what's on the other side of the hill. It's vast, it's rich, it's where all the actual money is. And there you go. for the first time seeing this from hustle culture, shiny object syndrome.
Now, before I get into the meat and potatoes of this video, I want to let you know that there's going to be a special bonus at the end. I'm going to share with you a niche that I discovered along my journey, an organic discovery that I made on this journey, as well as the strategy that I used to discover it and how you can use that to find entirely new niches that you can capitalize on. Now, back to my crane kicking frenzy. The product I had decided to launch was a play parachute. It's basically a parachute that's not made for parachuting. It's made for playing with. Kids gather around it in a circle, they wave it up and down, you throw it up, you hide underneath it, you shake it, put balls on top of it, that sort of thing.
Does this seem like a good item to you guys just right off the cuff? Now, I want to say that for many different kinds of items out there, you'd be surprised how well it actually sells. However, common sense will tell us who has the space for something like this, right? People who live out in the sticks, people with very large homes, very large basements, privatized kindergartens like this one, daycare centers that have this kind of space. Otherwise, who's buying this stuff? Already, you're working with a very limited demographic. So you have to be careful of what you're doing. It's not that just because you niche down, like you shouldn't do the item because it's too niche down. That's not necessarily the case. But you could already see that there's a lot of constraints when trying to do this particular item with how many people it applies to. So let's be very careful of what's going on here.
Mostly used in primary school. Choosing this product was actually the first mistake that I made. While the product looked like a great opportunity due to the lack of competition from other sellers on the various listings in the category, it turned out to actually have such low sales volume that there just wasn't enough sales to go around for everyone that was trying to sell that product. Even worse, I didn't know at the time that 90% of the action, meaning the sales that were happening on the various products, weren't being shared in the buy box equally. They were actually going to the top 1 or 2 sellers on every listing.
So he frames this completely wrong. It's because he's the Amazon FBA hustler, not a real business, that he's talking about the buy box. What he really means is that it's only the top couple of sellers who are the big hungry hippos up top. And this is exactly what we've been teaching week after week on the supply chain, where what is the opportunity score here and what does it mean? It means how well the spread of sales is between all of the listings that are here selling very similar things. And that's exactly what I've been teaching you guys. And he has done the exact opposite of this by not noticing that.
When making my purchasing decisions, I obviously evaluated the product using Keepa. I looked at the sales rank, I looked at the Jungle Scout sales count estimator, and to me, it looked like it sold enough for it to be a good venture.
You'll notice that he didn't use the Jungle Scout opportunity score, nor did he ever bother to understand how to read the opportunity score, as I have taught you guys, where it's about the spread of sales between the rest of the sellers. That way, if you jump into this market, are you going to get wet along with all of the rain clouds here? Versus getting into an area where it seems as if like, hey, there's not a lot of competitors. Why? Because all of the sales in this area is only shared between the top 2 or 3 guys. That's a bad spot to be in. And that's what I taught, that you need to find a better battleground. This isn't it.
But apparently the sales charts were just not that accurate. And when you multiply that with the fact that the buy box wasn't being shared evenly with the sellers that were selling it, it turned out to be a nightmare.
Buy box means that you are piggybacking off of the exact same listing. So it's because he's so used to FBA hustle culture that he frames it that way. But that's actually not what he means, because when you are selling your own thing, you're selling your own thing in private label with your own private listing. So it's listing versus listing. It's not you selling the exact same thing, like going out and getting some Nikes, some Under Armours, and then selling off of the same Under Armour listing, where only the top guys who have the best prices and the best account reputations is always hogging up the buy box. So there is a conflation of mechanics here, and that becomes very confusing for people.
Here's how I could have remedied it. If I would have just tested the market first, I would have realized this, and I could have done it by purchasing brand name parachutes either from a wholesaler or distributor or even on Amazon itself and selling them at a loss, but still gathering data and seeing how quickly they sell. I could have did it in another way by purchasing 5 to 10 parachutes from AliExpress and setting up a quick listing and getting more data that way, and both of those would have been far better than me jumping the gun and going directly to buying 500 units from a Chinese supplier for $3,800.
So in the first episode, the first thing that I taught you guys is no white labeling, no high MOQs. We start with micro batches to make sure that the item is not only viable, but can also pass through our hands first, and then we scale afterwards. Again, always a story about getting way too ahead of yourself. Always some newbie getting into the game and having way too grandiose of ideas and doing way too much in the beginning. You have to do exactly as Mark Randolph has said in as the first CEO of Netflix. You need the cheapest, quickest, easiest way to get some of your main answers first before diving 10 toes in.
Now, this mistake was pretty bad, but what I did next was even worse in my opinion. When I analyzed the competition, I noticed that everybody's product basically looked exactly the same. And so I came up with the not so genius idea of differentiating my product from the competition with branding, and most notably by changing the colors. Now, when I was a kid, way back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and we played with these parachutes in primary school, the game that we would play with it most of the time was actually called popcorn. In this game, you basically just put balls on top of the parachute, and then everybody is around in a circle, flapping the parachute, trying to knock the balls off or launch them as high as they can in the air. And so I decided, why not leverage that and use the game name in the branding, and that's when I decided to call it Popcorn Parachute. After I thought of the name, that's when I decided I was going to change the colors of the parachute so that it could match a popcorn bucket. So instead of the traditional colors, it was going to be alternating red and white. I had even had the idea of later down the line creating some balls that look like popcorn and including them with the product, either on the main listing or on a variation of the listing.
So if you're following along at home, you're already hearing that, okay, he had some ideas for product differentiation, but in nowhere did he try to confirm this in any way through the lens of the seller, the buyer, the reviewer. Like, you are innovating in a way where you're not sure if anybody even cares about this. And your only way of testing is to go ahead and buy 500 units of it and let's roll the dice. This is way too risky in order to do this stuff. Business is a very calculated type of gamble, not this kind of wild gamble. And he's going to explain that in a moment as the lesson that he's learned.
Now, usually this is a good idea, changing the branding or the look of your product so that you can differentiate from your competitors. But in this scenario, it wasn't, and I took it way too far. While it's true that customers for this specific type of product were not beholden to any certain brand of parachute, it's also true that everybody that was going to purchase one of these parachutes was looking for that classic, iconic primary color parachute: red, blue, yellow, and green. And yes, I know green is not a primary color. So in this case, changing the way the product looked actually alienated me from my potential future customers and ended up costing me a lot of sales. How could I have avoided it? I think I could have avoided this one by just understanding the nuances of how products are perceived a little bit better and being aware of how certain product changes can affect the perception and desirability of that product with the customer. It also didn't help that I got so romantic about my own ideas in branding changes, which I of course thought were amazing when in fact they were quite terrible. This next mistake I made is a big one because making this mistake is what resulted in me receiving subpar quality products from.
So earlier on in that whole mistake, this is exactly why I taught you guys the 4 lenses of scrutiny. It covers every single perspective lens under the sun that you need to consider before shelling out money, before getting way too ahead of yourselves. How do we make sure that people even care about what our ideas are? This is exactly how you do the research and how much of it to do.
My supplier. This is actually something that's very universal that all private label sellers can learn from. So the product I had ordered was cut and sew, much like clothing. If you don't know what that means, don't worry. It just means that it was made of pieces of fabric that were cut and then sewn together. I, of course, wanted to make sure my product was of the utmost superior quality. And when I received the samples from the supplier, they were beautiful. They had 0 flaws. They were literally perfect. They were exactly how I wanted them to be for the customer. The problem is that when I received my 500 units a few months later, the quality was nowhere near as good as the samples.
So I mentioned since episode 1 that you have 3 paths forward. You could go ahead and deal with the factory yourself, and there's going to be a little bit of trust involved in this. Or you could hire a sourcing agent in order to represent you. And it's the sourcing agent's job to make sure that there is quality control, they hold them to their lead times, and take care of the logistics safety all for you. And that's exactly what I do, except the difference is your average sourcing agent has no background in marketing and product development, while I do. So working with me, you get both guidance and brokerage, and you could do that on pegasusblueprint.com.
There was sloppy, loose threads all over the place. Pieces of fabric were pulling apart, and even handles were ripping off the parachute easily. It was a nightmare. Let's just say it wasn't the quality I was expecting.
My father has never been without a sourcing agent. I have never been without a sourcing agent because you don't have eyes and ears on the ground, as well as what he's about to get into in terms of leaving a deposit. When we go ahead and take care of the bill, we never pay it in full because that way the factory has incentive to do it right.
And when I started to actually pull the parachutes out of the packaging to inspect the quality myself, only about 50% of the parachutes that I opened were meeting the quality that I had expected. But by that time, it was too late because the manufacturer in China already had my money and they weren't exactly cooperating with the communication that I was giving them after the fact. This is when I learned that I should have used a third-party inspection service. Usually, when making private label product orders, you pay half of the order up front. That way, the factory can afford to start making the products for you and paying their employees for the work that they're taking on doing so. And then, when the product's done, you pay the remainder and they ship the product to you.
Right. So the thing is that because he's only taken a crack at private label once, he's saying, I should have used a private inspector. I'm saying you should use a private sourcing agent because they would act as both your inspector and hold their lead times and take care of your logistics for you. So they're responsible for pretty much everything for you. That becomes a one-stop shop. That becomes an all-encompassing package rather than just worry about the quality control.
Now, the way it works when you hire a third-party inspection service is basically the same up front. But at the end, when it's time to pay the second half of the balance, you don't pay it until your inspector comes in, inspects the product, and you approve it. So what they do is they come in, they take pictures and samples of random units on the pallet or in the shipment or in the shipping container. They get videos, they send you all this information, and with that information, you can see with your own eyes the quality of your product before you pay the remaining balance, which is usually the profit for the manufacturer. That way, you're protected. because the manufacturer wants to get paid, and you're not going to pay them until the product meets the quality that you were told you were going to get. The importance of this step cannot be stressed enough, especially if you're working with a new supplier that you haven't quite developed a good working relationship with. If you don't use an inspector, you just cannot be certain what the quality will be like of the products that you receive from your supplier. The next big mistake that I made was that I didn't have any launch plan in place other than using Amazon pay-per-click ads. Now, I'm not saying that Amazon PPC doesn't work, but solely relying on it is not exactly a strategy. I could have done giveaways, I could have hired other services to help me rank, or maybe I could have got really creative and done something like in-person sales where you reimburse people for making discounted purchases of your item.
So this, again, comes from someone who lacks a lot of experience when doing proper business on Amazon because, again, you are an FBA hustler. They have never done PPC at all. So I really want to make that clear into this insight. This man has never done Amazon PPC campaign because he never had to, because he's selling Nikes, and you don't need to promote Nikes. Jordan has promoted Nikes for you. So therefore, what's happening with what he's saying here, right, is part of something that, because he has never done it, he hasn't done it in a way where he has felt the actual power of PPC when it is done properly for you. See, the idea is that Amazon's platform is so big with so many people buying that as long as you have the right item with the right setting, it has always been the winning formula in order to help you sell. Now, that doesn't mean that once you have your trademark, your name, it's properly, privatized, that you shouldn't go ahead and promote this item externally as well, because now you have a reason to do that. And you could make plenty of, free TikTok videos, YouTube short videos. There's so much help of AI these days, as long as you are within reason that you could go ahead and help promote your item. I recommend, if anything, having an external website, just like one time I featured this company called Don't Die in the Woods, where they are an introductory website and you can't even buy their goods off of their own website because they want that website to redirect all of the sales traffic over to their Amazon store. Because that way, as there's more conversions in their store, their listing ranks even higher. And when their ranking ranks higher, they get even more volume. So there's huge benefit in order to do this. And if for whatever reason one day you want the traffic to just go ahead into your own personal shopping cart instead, all of the social media work that you did directed over to your website first. So you could just go ahead and change your website from an introductory website to just a basic e-commerce website where people check out right there if stuff should blow up. Otherwise, you could just leave it constantly funneling and redirecting the traffic over to Amazon and growing your Amazon store. Either way, it's going to be very lucrative, especially with all the types of automation that we're doing with stuff directly being developed in China and sent directly over to the Amazon FBA warehouses. So you don't have to take care of any of that.
And let them keep the item in exchange for a review. This final mistake that I made,
what he was saying right there, getting people to review the item, et cetera, all that stuff. Amazon already has a program. It's called Vines. When you have a moment, check out what Amazon Vines is, right? It is basically 2 for free, 10 for $75, and 30 for $200. So what happens is if you pay $10, you get 10 Vines for free, $200, you get 30 Vines for free, or you could just take 2 Vines for free. So what is Vines? Vines is basically you sign up for it only once you are brand registered, which is why brand registry is so important, because you get so many abilities unlocked for you apart from just being a verified rights member, where you have defensibility against anybody who's trying to infringe on your product. That way it goes from he said, she said to no, I'm the owner. Now, when you have the Vines program, you have to keep in mind that they don't owe you 5 stars, but they do owe you a review. And if you recall how difficult it was when you first started off eBay at 0 reviews, how many people give you a review per sale? Right. So what you could do in the beginning is sign up for Vines, whether you want to do 2, 10, or 30. Then what happens is that you would give up that many amount of goods for free, and they will owe you a review. So what you could do to launch your strategy in the beginning is to sign up for Vines first. Don't pay for PPC just yet because you're at 0, and then let all the Vines come in first. And then we start promoting the product, and then we start launching the whole thing. And that's the way you're supposed to do it. And that's the way that I would advise you as somebody who has this much experience.
Might actually have been the biggest mistake of them all, and it is just the fact that I was being so stubborn that I took way too long to realize that this product wasn't going to work. I was so married to my idea and the branding and the fact that I didn't want to fail on this new project that I just waited way too long to pull the ripcord on this parachute. It was actually over 2 years later from the launch of the product to when I decided to finally throw in the towel. By then, I was not only out the $3,800 that I spent on the product, I was also out all the money that I spent on Amazon PPC, all the FBA storage fees, a ton of my time, and the money that I lost selling products at a loss trying to get sales to stimulate the listing. In the end, I couldn't even liquidate them, and I was forced to donate them to Goodwill. When the dust settled, I felt like such a failure that I had less than zero desire to try again. I would have got out with a smaller loss, yes, and maybe just a tax write-off, but most importantly, I wouldn't have been so crushed that I wouldn't want to try again.
His loss is your gain right here. Okay. This is exactly the problem with the nightmare story. People get so crushed that they never want to try again, which is why ever since the first couple of episodes, I have taught you guys, if we flop small, we get back up and then we try again. See, what you're doing is kind of like working your way through a maze, right? Okay. Dead end, dead end, dead end. This is the path finally. That's what's actually happening. So every single time you hit a certain dead end, you try a different direction. That's not failing. That's quickly finding out, no, this is not the right way to do it. This is the right way to do it. And that's the proper approach to business, having that grit and not giving up, because the light at the end of the tunnel is going to pay off big. That's what's very important about business, that finally all the risk that you took on, the reward more than covers all of it. So if you flop, you could flop 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times, and it's not a problem, because the ones that do hit, they hit for years. Imagine hitting a jackpot that pays you off for years. That's why this is okay. But for all of your attempts, we got to keep it small. We got to keep that risk mitigated. And that's not what happened here. And that's why it got crushed so bad. Let that be a personal lesson that you never want to go through.
I would have still been in the game.
Right.
But because I waited so long, I was completely crushed. And it's honestly a shame, because I would have been able to go into try number 2 with all of the new knowledge that I gained from making these mistakes on my first attempt. I think this concept is pretty important. You literally have to know when to hold them and when to fold them.
Know when to walk away, know when to run. You never count your money. When you're sitting at the table, there'll be time enough to count them when the dealing is done. The gambler. How ironic, huh? Let's keep going.
Especially in private label, because not all products are gonna work. So the faster that you can recognize that a product's not working and liquidate it and get on to the next product that is gonna work, the better. This is also why lots of larger, successful private label sellers launch more than one product at the same time. That way, they get really good at it, they drop the bad ones, focus more on the good ones, create variations and bundles for the good ones, and they just keep rolling through.
Sort of, not really. Okay, in the beginning, my first item, I sold it successfully for 2 years. before I developed my second item, because it was going very well, where I didn't have to develop a second item. I needed to release other sizes and colors. But at the point of where I'm noticing, okay, it's starting to plateau, now I can spend more of my time on developing the next item and the next item. And what happens is that once you have 2 or 3 items, they constantly pay for the next project. But once you have 5 or 6 items, then you have enough seed money generated for you to go ahead and do 2 items at the time, should you have the focus and the time in order to do that. Now, the good thing about this business is that once everything is set, once it's all rolling, then your workflow gets significantly reduced. One of the things that people need to understand, that when you are just a reseller, your business is overly simplistic with only 4 ingredients of sourcing, processing, listing, shipping. And when your business is too simplistic, it is subsidized by a lot of hard labor. However, once you start moving and developing systems where your business is now more complex, now the labor becomes much lighter than it was before. So you have to be willing to set this up, go through the process, learn the knowledge necessary in order to do this, and your life will be much easier. And should you want to spend the rest of your free time thrifting, you could certainly go back and do that.
You literally got to know when to hold them and when to fold them. Now for those bonuses that I promised those of you that made it this far in the video. Appreciate you. Through the lifespan of this product, I actually was able to sell 150 to 200 units or so. And I did get a bunch of reviews. I got a couple bad ones due to the quality of the stitching, but the content of a couple of the positive reviews were very interesting. Now, usually searching through customer reviews is a great strategy to find issues with products that you're competing against, that you could then take that data and use it to improve your own products. So what I mean is that when you find a product or product category that you want to produce or compete against, you look at the reviews that your competitors are getting and you pay special attention to the 1 to 2 to 3 star reviews, and you take note of any problems that customers are having with the product that you could remedy in your product and thus make an improvement. In my case, I had a somewhat unique scenario. I had a couple reviews where customers were leaving me 5 stars, but they were also leaving lengthy comments talking about how they used the product in a way it wasn't intended for. This was extremely interesting to me and gave me a bunch of new ideas. To help illustrate this, I'm just going to go ahead and read those product reviews to you. So this was a 5-star review and the title says, "Awesome buy!" I used this for a very different purpose than it was intended for, but it worked amazingly well. I looped the handles of this product through the legs of our Easy Up canopy to make it appear like a circus tent for a party.
So here's the thing, right? This is where I've taught you guys that you learn by doing. And as you start to develop your items and then you have your feedbacks and stuff, you start to learn, hey, how I could start offering complementary products as we learn by doing. That this is our experience. But definitely also start off with an item that is a better product to market fit, as well as figure out what your proper settings are so that you could start finding like what your plateau of daily sales is. Now, I want to point out one thing that is super important right here, as I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit. And it says, all in all, for $10, this thing is a great buy. So when he was finally able to sell 100 to 200 of these, he sold it for $10. Okay? Keep that in mind. You can't really go wrong. And if you feel you could do better for this specific color, look around. $34.99 is the cheapest, right? He liquidated this at way under the cost just to get rid of it, just to recoup as much as he can, because $10 is still better than just discarding and donating this item. So be very careful to catch all the details.
It was great. They went on to describe some more pros and cons about the product, but it's not really relevant for the point that I'm trying to state. They also mentioned that all in all, for $10, this thing was a great buy. I was losing money at that price, but I was trying to stimulate the listing, right, to get sales. You can't really go wrong. And if you feel you can do better for this specific color, take a look around, because $34.99 is the cheapest I could find besides this one. I'll be ordering another, if not a few more. Interesting. The other 5-star review is just titled Parachute! I bought this parachute to use as a ceiling decoration in my haunted house this past year for my clown room. It is big, well constructed, and will last for years to come. Handles are sturdy and it is very bright. I'm happy with this purchase. So after receiving those two feedback, I immediately began searching for similar products in this niche that fulfilled what the customers wanted. And there honestly wasn't very many products that I could find. I also took note of some of the popular keywords that were appearing on these listings and then put them in my product title, my bullets, my description, and even on the back end as my keywords. So now I'm going down the rabbit hole of school or small carnival.
Keep in mind, guys, that sometimes, right, when a certain area is not that competitive, it's probably like that for a certain reason, because just not that many people need your popcorn parachute for whatever canopy type reasons. So it was a perfect product to fit for that person, but not necessarily for the entire market. So this is why I teach you guys the way I teach you guys, with the opportunity score and how well it is already being reacted to by the market, of whether or not there are a lot of thick rain clouds in this area forming, and we should start preparing for that. That's what it's really more about than all of these type of speculative things, because whatever he's saying right now, yes, there's certain merit to it, but they could still go either way, as opposed to when you see thick rain clouds forming, there's only one thing that means.
Niche, and just realizing that it is completely underserved. There was not a lot of products for the customers, and what was there was just overpriced.
It's underserved because you know there's high demand there and it's underserved. But if there's only just a few sellers doing it, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's underserved.
There's actually little to no options for carnival-themed canopies that were priced appropriately.
Right.
And even now, there's still not a lot of options. And the rabbit hole for this niche goes a lot deeper, which means even more product opportunity.
But there's not a lot of options because it matches that it's not a lot of demand. You have to be certain of that first. If there's not a lot of options, yet there's a lot of demands, now you need to jump in on this. If that's not the case, if you're not meeting those prerequisites, careful.
The great part with a lot of these products is that they're somewhat consumable, which means for the most part, customers will order them to use them one time and then probably throw them away. And if they need to get them again next year, they'll just buy it again. Some of the ideas I came up with were red and white striped table skirts, skimmer hats, little red and white striped carnival guy vests or costumes, maybe some weird mustaches, red and white striped themed popcorn bags or buckets, as well as games and prizes. Honestly, there was a lot of opportunity, especially to create bundle packages.
I disagree. He's going to make the same mistake again. There's definitely a lot of ideas that he's coming up with, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those are all opportunity. You see what I'm saying? This is from your 20 plus year private labeler speaking, right? That there's always different kinds of, because you're very imaginative. Reezy is very imaginative. I'll give him that, right? So, I could do this, I could do that, and it could be popcorn theme and the red, white stripes, barbershops, et cetera, et cetera. Like we could keep going down the rabbit hole of this thing, but that doesn't mean that they're all, great opportunities. That's completely different. That doesn't come to fruition without applying strategy.
Because many of these customers were ordering the tablecloth and the prizes or a game, all kinds of different stuff. Ultimately, ending my short journey with private label was incredibly easy because I had so many other things going on at the time. My YouTube channel was starting to take off. This was right before I got the chance to interview Gary Vee. My used book business was still flourishing, and we were now getting heavy into retail arbitrage. I was sad to let it go, but in a weird way, it was super relieving to get one item off my plate, which allowed me some breathing room so that I could focus my attention and energy more onto the things that were already working for me at the time.
This is about expanding your circle of competence. Warren Buffett talks about this, right? Stay in your lane, do what you know until you can expand your circle of competence and then get into other things. So, in the meantime, as we're trying new things, we have to risk mitigate. And none of those skills and strategy is applied here because this is somebody who is blindly trying it for the first time. As always, guys, this is what the common horror story is. This is what gets circulated and regurgitated all over the place. But ultimately, this is the lesson that people need to learn, not just stay away. All right, my fellow loungers, I hope you all enjoyed that, but that's going to wrap things up for the Supply Chain Season 1. And I'd like to thank everyone for sticking it out with me week in and week out as we learn more about traditional business of e-commerce. Please let me know how you felt about this new series as well as all of its episodes. So any thoughts, questions, comments, suggestions, all welcomed. So we'll be taking a break and coming back for Season 2 in the spring. With that being said, Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope to see you all then.